Good morning. Welcome to Coffee and Conversations. My name is Karim Rafa. I'm here with Jean-Yves Le Gall, president of CNES. It's a pleasure having you here.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming today and taking the time.
My pleasure.
Before we get into the depths of space exploration, can you tell me a bit more about what CNES is doing currently in terms of research and where you're going?
CNES, in fact, is a French space agency. So it means that we are an organization with 2,500 people located in 4 centers in France, 3 centers in continental France and 1 center in French Guiana, the place where we launch European rockets. We have a total budget which is slightly 2.5 billion euro, and we have 5 fields of activities: launchers, everyone knows the Ariane rockets, science, Earth observation, telecommunications, and defense.
What are some of the most, interesting areas that you're currently working in? Can you give us a few examples?
There are 3 points which are very important. The first one is innovation. And innovation is just not about the technology, but also deep change in methods, in the way we are developing our programs. The second point is climate, because climate change today is a reality, and satellites are key to observe and to fight climate change, because out of the 50 essential climate variables which have been defined to measure what is a climate, 26, more than half, can be observed just from space. And the third point, which is hot, is exploration, and exploration with astronauts flying on the space station, or exploration of the moon, of Mars, of some other celestial bodies. And so in total we have a quite comprehensive space program with, as I say, a number of points of interest.
Can you tell me where you're going now with all of this research and how you're interacting, say, with private companies that are currently crowding the space?
It's a major evolution of space activity worldwide today. It is because the ticket to develop a space business is lower and lower, because it's a consequence of the digital era, this consequence of the miniaturization of satellites. And so you have a number of new actors. Government. A few years ago, we had a total of 10 space agencies worldwide, and now there are more than 50 space agencies, and also a private initiative and a number of startups, because these startups are interested not only in launchers or in satellites, but in all what is related to applications of space, using the space data for either observation or telecommunications.
So when it comes to, say, government contracts, I'm not sure how open France is as the US, for instance, to let private companies bid on government contracts?
Yes, of course. We have a number of private companies, and we develop private companies. For that, we implement an investment fund, so-called Cosmic Capital, to promote and to support startups.
Is there anything in particular, any spaces per se, on a smaller scale, say an accelerator model, incubator model that you're working with?
Yes, we have many incubators in France, but we have also a lot of relationship with startups, because we have many engineers. We are very, very skilled at CNES, and dialoguing with the startups, working together allows what I used to call cross-fertilization.
Yeah, France is very well known to produce some of the best talent, I believe, when it comes to engineering and so on, European-wide, or if not worldwide.
Yes, that's true. And we are today the second nation in terms of annual expense per capita, just after the US. The US spend 50 euro per year and per inhabitant. In France, we are at 37.
Are there certain areas that you personally see should deserve more attention that aren't getting it currently, or that you see more promising?
No, I think that this is application in general. Launchers and satellites, of course, are keys, but I am sure that in the future all the developments and the progress will be made in the field of applications rather than in the field of launchers or on satellites. For instance, if you take Galileo, which is the European GPS, and Galileo is so successful that in a few years we will say that the GPS is the US Galileo. It will be different, but with Galileo we have an extraordinary accuracy, and we can develop many applications using the signal of Galileo. The same for Copernicus, which is the biggest system to monitor environment, which is an European system, and we have also many applications. And so we see that with all these programs, we have a very big number of data, and it is time now to use this data.
And this data, when it comes to France in particular, or even worldwide, is it centralized? Is it accessible to people? Is it still very much a closed ecosystem where each company or each government that sends a satellite collects data?
No, in fact, it's a system which is open. For instance, for Copernicus, there was a debate to know if the data of Copernicus should be in free access or should be sold. And I advocated a lot in order we have a free access to this data. This is exactly what we did. And it considerably fueled the development of startups using this data.
With the reduced size of payloads, the cost of sending a small satellite into space is substantially lower and accessible.
Yeah.
Do you see a possible mismatch with the general attitude going towards sending your own satellite into space and not relying on a third party versus using open source?
I think that we will have both, because that's true that nanosatellites are more and more affordable. For instance, for Earth observation, 10 years ago, you used to go to vacation with a camera and quite a big lens. Now you go to vacation with your phone, with a very small device to take pictures on a much better quality than 10 years ago. For the satellites, it's the same.
The amount of satellites and ex-satellites and debris currently orbiting the Earth have posed, say, an acknowledged problem?
It is not really a problem, because in the early stage of the space conquest, we created a number of debris. But since then, people realized that, in fact, it could damage the other satellites. And now there are very strict rules, and we don't create new debris. The ones which have been created a few years ago, in fact, at the end, they burn in the upper atmosphere, and it is a rising star. But the debris problem is not a very big issue.
So I understand that you have an MOU with Singapore, and this opens the way for partnerships. Is there anything you can tell us?
We decided to enter into a very quite comprehensive cooperation with Singapore, and this is why a number of MOU have been signed between CNES and VEDB. We have also agreements with the two main universities of Singapore, and we are working on very concrete applications, for instance, a small satellite, a small nanosatellite, other applications using space data and so on. In fact, in Singapore, we have a lot of dynamism. People invest a lot in innovation. There are some technological elements which could be applied for space. And on our side, we have the heritage, a number of people who are very skilled, and this is why we need to put all these people together in order to develop projects in common.
Singapore does have a very similar approach to what you described of France as an ecosystem that's ready to, yes, at a governmental level, implement small startup ideas, put talent to work. It's really great to see the cooperation also goes further than just the nation itself, but also internationally.
Yes. And I think that we have to continue, because in parallel there are also many other cooperations between France and Singapore in the field of technology, and space is one of these aspects. And if you look back in the past, Singapore launched two telecommunication satellites, and both of them have been launched by Ariane launch vehicles from French Guiana. So we have a very long-standing cooperation with Singapore.
So the head of the European Space Agency is very keen on the idea of a moon village, or a colonization, or using it as a stop per se. What is your or France's opinion?
You see, there are a number of talks today about going to the moon, going to the Mars, and so on. The idea of a moon village is a very shining idea, but building a village in general is not very expensive, but building a village on the moon is very, very expensive. And this is why that up to now France made different choices, and rather than going to the moon and building a village to the moon, we preferred to go to Mars, and we have a very interesting cooperation with NASA, With NASA, we landed a rover, so-called Curiosity, on Mars on the 6th of August 2012 with a very big camera which has been made by CNES, and a few weeks ago on the 26th of November we land InSight on Mars, and the main instrument of InSight is a seismometer which is now working on Mars, and we have data. And so this is the reality, this is what we are doing today. Now perhaps in the future there will be these ideas of a moon village, but today instead of going to the moon we do prefer to be on Mars. Going to Mars is very, very difficult. Sending robots to Mars with artificial intelligence is more and more promising. We can go to Mars every 26 months because you need to wait for a window 1 month every 26 months. As the next launch window, which will take place in July 2020, we will have 5 missions going to Mars. Mars 2020 with NASA, and we will be on board. ExoMars, developed by the European Space Agency, will be on board. A Chinese mission, an Indian mission, and probably the most surprising, a mission from the United Arab Emirates, because the Emirates decided to invest in space and to send a mission to Mars, and clearly this demonstrates the interest to go to Mars.
With all of these opportunities also come opportunities for investment. Can you tell us a bit more of the profile of investors, what they're looking for, and where there could be potential return?
In fact, it's a business which is a little bit tough because there are many, many projects, and some projects could be successful and the other ones. And so we see a profile for investors which is probably slightly different from what we saw for the rest of the startups. We have institutional investors, we have also financial investors, but with a strong technical culture, because in this business, either you understand what you do, and in other words, you are or a scientist or an engineer, and you are successful. If you don't understand what you do, it could be very difficult. And this is why it's a very, very specific business.
It is also tapping a bit onto the tourism and just general curiosity age. Some of the early adopters or early investors into space tourism, be it Virgin Galactic or Elon Musk's plan to have space tourism, were not from the sector, just
they were not from the sector, they were curious, but some of them sometimes are a little bit disappointed because it takes time and so on. And this is why before investing, you need to know exactly what you are going to do, and you need to have very skilled experts.
Indeed, indeed, very exciting times ahead. I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Mr. Legal, it was a pleasure having you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching, and see you soon.